We were told to be tight. But to reiterate, my time with the Mets is 7 years. As a Mets fan, growing up as a little boy in New Jersey, to eventually get to Queens when I'm 32 years old and get a chance to play 7 years for the team that I rooted for as a kid was dream come true stuff. And to pick out certain moments, I think there were just so many, but obviously getting an opportunity to play postseason and then the 2000 World Series, other than falling short of not winning, that whole experience was certainly one of the biggest highlights.
Okay. Howard?
I am extremely excited to be here today. It's going to be a special day. A lot of familiar faces out there. It's good to see you guys. The fact that all my family is going to be up to witness this is something I'm going to remember the rest of my life. And I think just being out there with the fans and be able to interact with them in some way, it's always good. That's what sets New York apart. So I'm excited, very thankful for the opportunity to have this, to go into the Hall of Fame. And, when my first time walking out of Shea Stadium, it gives you goosebumps when you walk out there because it was such a big ballpark. But having, 55,000 people out there cheering, it was pretty crazy. And just something that you look forward to every day. After you experience it once, you want to keep doing it. And, the teams I was on, fortunately, were really, really good. And the first few years, we were outstanding. We had won a championship. Didn't get there again, but the guys along the way wouldn't have traded them in for anybody. So it's an honor to be here with these guys and going in with them. So thank you.
Nice.
Howie?
Well, the whole thing is more than just a little bit surreal. In fact, if you all listen very carefully, you can probably hear raucous laughter emanating from my old hometown nearby here in Bayside, Queens, because the thought of someone with, as we've seen recently, limited athletic ability getting into the New York Mets Hall of Fame, I'm telling you, at PS 205, they are howling in the schoolyard. They couldn't think of anything more unreasonable. But then again, on a lot of levels, neither could I, because as a 15-year-old in the upper deck in 1969, and I'm telling you, that year changed my life because I was such a passionate Mets fan who never dreamt for one moment, certainly going into that season, that the Mets could do what they went on to do and win the World Series. It just shaped me in so many ways because it was a life lesson. It really taught me that if you really bust your butt and believe in yourself, you can accomplish virtually anything. So I might not have been born with a great deal of athletic ability, but to have found a way to get into the games for free and enjoy being around the Mets organization was enough. To be part of it and to be honored like this today, I'm still not sure this is going to be real when I wake up tomorrow morning. But what really is the icing on the cake is that everybody up here with me is a friend. I mean, they're not just guys I know, they're friends. And for Gary and I, who I keep using the same term, kindred spirits, to go in together. I hope you can articulate it because I can't. So you're up.
Well, I'm frankly overwhelmed by the whole thing. Ethan said talk about your time playing in Queens. Our time playing in Queens was stickball in the schoolyard. I always wanted to be one of those guys. I wanted to be a shortstop for the Mets, but having no talent and there are other ways of absorbing this game, and what I do know is that the same people that Howie and I sat with in the upper deck at Shea, there are hundreds, if not thousands of them who could have done this job, who loved the Mets just as much, who loved baseball and knew baseball and breathed baseball the same way that we did, and we are just two of the lucky ones. Even being here for 35 years is frankly mind-boggling to me, but to be in the pantheon of just a few dozen people honored with the Mets Hall of Fame is frankly beyond anything that I could have ever anticipated. So I'm very happy that my family will be here today. I'm so happy that Al and Hojo are getting in. They were two of my favorite players to watch and to get to know, and to have Howie alongside of me is just the icing on the cake. We came from different places, but the same place, and we've wound up somehow conjoined in this incredible honor. And let me not leave Jay out of that equation, because Jay has been the backbone of this franchise for nearly half a century. So, Jay?
Thanks. Thanks, Howie. I just wanted to say a special thanks to Fred Wilpon, sitting over there. He hired me 44 years ago, took a chance on a young kid out of Fairleigh Dickinson College, and thank you, Fred, for hiring me. During my time here, I've been blessed with a lot of great, loyal assistants. Ethan Wilson over there, Shannon Ford, who's a plaque name outside, and Dennis D'Agostino. Three great people, great loyal people, helped me get through the years. And if you put something in my legacy, it would be my association with the 2001 team. Al and Todd's in the room. We made a difference that year after 9/11. Visits to Ground Zero, the firehouses, police stations, and I think we really helped the city heal. So one thing that I'm proud of is my association with the 2001 team.
Thank you, everybody. At this point, we'll open it up for questions. Bill?
Congratulations to all five, to Gary and Howie. We've heard Al talk about his best moment. Can you talk about yours in the booth?
Well, there have been very few times that I've delivered a call where I actually got goosebumps while I was doing it. And I said this to David, but when David Wright came back from his long injury-induced layoff in 2015 in Philadelphia, and he hits that home run into the upper deck at Citizens Bank Park, just knowing how beloved David is by everybody in the organization, by his teammates, by those in the media who dealt with him every day. While I was describing that ball in flight, I literally felt goosebumps coming over me because, again, of who David is. The only other time two other times I really felt that was Johan's no-hitter, because, just as Gary will attest, I never thought that was going to happen. I mean, I thought it was just fated somehow that the Mets would never throw a no-hitter. And when that ball nestled into Josh Tolley's glove, I said, really? And then went on with the rest of the call. But to have the words, the Mets win the pennant, come out of my mouth in 2015, that's pretty good. I almost choked up when I made it because of what that meant. So those are the few off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm not really good with moments. My feeling has always been that the most important part of any broadcaster's job is not what they do in the 15 seconds where a big play happens, but more of how they settle in with fans over the 500 hours that you're on the air during a season. But I will say this, the 1999 season was the most memorable to me. I arrived in 1989 after the greatest 5-year stretch in the history of the franchise, and things suddenly plummeted when I arrived. No coincidence, I'm sure. But, after 10 years of the Mets not making the postseason, 1999 for me was just a magical year. There were so many memorable moments, and Al can probably attest to them all, coming from 4 runs down in the bottom of the ninth to beat Curt Schilling, the last weekend when the Mets were 2 behind with 3 to play, and Brad Klontz throws a wild pitch that gives them a chance to get into the postseason. And then, of course, Al's spectacular performance in Cincinnati, Fonzie hitting the grand slam in Arizona, and Todd Pratt hitting the game-winning home run in the final game of the series against Arizona, Robin Ventura's grand slam single, Piazza's home run against Smoltz in Game 6. I mean, all those things just one after another that season, that for me was the most memorable time that I've ever spent behind the microphone.
Hojo, you played for the '84 Tigers, which
Yes.
was one of the best teams.
Yep.
And you did not play in that postseason. I'd like to know how much did going to the Mets help your career the next year?
Well, it helped a lot. It helped a lot to be in that environment for 5 games. We kind of went right through Kansas City and San Diego to win the ring. It helped to be in that. It helped to be in that, on that team all that season, winning big and just keep making sure we kept it there. And then getting traded over here, when I heard Jay's voice on the line, I was real excited. I was ecstatic about it, because anytime you go through that stuff, even though I wasn't a big part of the World Series that year in '84, played a lot during the season, and that experience still carries over. It's Major League Baseball, and when you go from one place to the next, if you're looking for, similarities, the Mets were certainly the equal of Detroit. I mean, when it comes to players and the ability and the potential to win a championship. So for me, it was fun. It was an easy transition. National League, I love the National League, always have, and the style of play just fit me better. So it was great.
Danny?
Congratulations to everyone. This question is specifically for Howie. Howie, this year, it's 20 years ago that Bob Murphy retired. I was there. I'm sure many that are present here were there as well for that retirement there at Shea Stadium. That final season, is there anything specifically he shared with you? It might even been a joke or something along the lines of what you obviously do for a living.
No, Murph wasn't exactly soupy sales. He wasn't a guy that was going to, make a whole lot of jokes. He was a very stern partner. Now, Gary worked with him way more than I did. But one thing about Murph was that he was a tough grader. I mean, if he were a professor, you'd have a hard time getting an A from Murph. And when I started doing radio more frequently, I had already been doing television, which is a completely different animal. And radio is so much more intricate, so much involved. You've got to be so much more descriptive. And at that stage, I was not very happy with how I sounded on the radio. But I was doing a game with Murph one day, and might well have been that last season in '03. And I had completed an inning, and then we threw to commercial. And I just said something to Bob. I said, I don't know if I'm ever going to really get this. I don't feel like I'm right yet doing radio. And for Murph, this was so out of character. He just took his hand and patted me on the thigh, and he said, "No, your radio is fine. Your radio work is fine." And, just the shock I had at hearing that was the kind of affirmation that you could only compare to receiving from a parent, And so, Murph, there was a generation gap about how to approach broadcasting a game. That was going to be inevitable with somebody who was significantly younger and trained a little bit differently. But that pat on the thigh, that meant the world to me and still does. So when I think of Murph, it's not just the happy recaps and all the great calls. It's that, at the very end, I felt like I had his approval, and that meant more than I can really ever describe.
Tyler?
Congratulations to everybody. A couple questions. I'll start with Al. You are a broadcaster yourself. You grew up in the area. Can you articulate a little bit about what a long-term broadcaster like you have here with Howie and Gary means to a fan? What your impressions are of them, and also just your evaluation of them as what makes them sitting here right now, what makes them such good broadcasters?
I'm not a broadcaster. I do television once in a while. I'm not that good.
You're an analyst.
But thank you. So I never got the whole the impartial thing. I don't think you should be a homer, and I've said this to these guys numerous times. I think when you're doing a team's broadcast, radio or television, I'll throw a number out there. 95% of the people watching are fans of that club. And I never got that you're not supposed to show favoritism. I disagree. As a player, I enjoyed it. I wanted to hear my guys, say favorable things, but also be honest. And that was my whole thing as a player. When I stunk, I was okay with the analysis of not doing well. Don't get into areas of what you think he's thinking, or it looks like it might be this, just the execution or lack of execution. So for these guys, and I was joking with them a little bit about, because when I say I was a Mets fan, I was a Mets fan at birth. My dad, born in Manhattan, raised in Long Island, loved Casey Stengel, and it was the start of the Leiter family. And it was all about that. As a baseball player, get a circuitous route. I get drafted by the Yankees. I go to Toronto, to Florida. So when I finally got here, like everything about the uniform, the stadium, I was so happy, and I tried to be more than just a pitcher. So when I do listen to the broadcasts, I think it's important that your broadcasters have some sense of, win one for the good guys. And I don't know where the homer comes into it. I think Howie and Gary, the balance of, because they're fans of the team, why not, and be proud of that, is to be at times sharp, as a fan is, right? We get a little upset when we see things that we don't like, but you still love your team. So for the longevity, the consistency of that voice, I graduated high school in 1984. The New York Mets put in their Hall of Fame. The last time broadcasters was my senior year of high school, for whatever it's worth. 1984, put in Lindsey Nelson, Murph, and Ralph Kiner. And here, Hojo and I going in with the next set of voices, and I get that. I grew up on those guys. As generations now have grown up with Howie and Gary.
And for Gary, you mentioned earlier that Howard and Al were two of your favorite players. What was it about them? I mean, we know their performances, but that resonated with you watching them.
Well, I'll start with Al because
Take it easy, guy.
nobody brought his passion for playing out in public as much as Al did. And most people who play Major League Baseball are passionate about what they do because you couldn't be as successful as these guys are at the highest level unless you did have passion. But Al wasn't afraid to show his passion. So many guys are stoic, and that works to their advantage. But Al lived and died with every pitch, and as a fan and as a broadcaster, you could live and die with him. And he brought that intensity to every start, and it was joyous to watch. And, he talks about falling short in the 2000 World Series. He didn't fall short. That 142 pitches that he threw in Game 5 before he gave up the 18-hop single to Luis Sojo that wound up beating him, that was one of the most heroic efforts I've ever seen. And Al should always be applauded for that. As for Howard, I feel as though he was an overlooked piece of Mets history for far too long. He was not a star on the '86 team. He was an important piece, but he became a star on Met teams that weren't as good. And I think that because of that, he sometimes gets overlooked. But there are very few players in the history of the game who have been switch hitters with the power and speed that Hojo brought to the table. And to be a three-time 30-30 player is an extraordinary feat. And his time in this Hall of Fame should have started a long time ago. And I'm glad we finally righted that wrong.
Can I add one thing about Al and Howard? This is very important to me because, a lot of guys hear stuff on the air, or they thought they heard it, but they heard it from their wives or their kids or whatever. So I could probably count on less than the entirety of two hands the number of players who in my career have actually voluntarily come up to me and said, hey, thanks for what you said on the air last night. And both Al and Howard, at one time or another in their careers, did that. And you have no idea how grateful that makes us, because you generally only hear when a player's upset about something you said. But for these two and a couple of others to have said, hey, thanks for that last night, that means the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tony?
My question is for Jay. A large part of what you've done here is creating moments and events like this. What does it feel like to kind of have the tables turned and be a part of one? Yeah.
Weird, really weird. I don't like to be on this side of the table. we've done a lot of great things in the last couple of years. The Old Timers Day game, trying to keep the tradition alive. So when I, switched jobs in 2019, my whole thing was not to just to bring back the superstar guys, to bring back the average, the 25th guy on the team. One of the great calls he ever got, Hobie Landreth was the first guy we picked in 1962. And when I spoke to him, he said I was the first guy from the organization I'd spoken to in 50 years. And that in a nutshell what we were trying to do, to reunite the family. But I think we're at a good place with the alumni, with the retirements, the Hall of Fame stuff, and it really makes me proud to. I'm so old, I work with all of these guys. So, I mean, that's, but it's really great. It's awkward being on this side of this thing, for sure.
Greg? Laura?
Jay, you've been part of the fabric of this franchise for so long. When you look at your career, what stands out as one of your biggest accomplishments for what you were able to do?
Just to try and I don't remember one fight I got along. The hardest thing for a PR guy to do is to strike the balance between ownership, the players, and the media. The players think you're partial to the media thinks you're partial to the players. Ownership thinks you're partial to the players and the media. And so the thing was just trying to walk a balance and keep the trust, And New York is a big city, a lot of papers. Once you get caught in a lie, a PR guy's a dead man. I always try to be honorable, tell the truth, and don't lose the level of confidence in media would happen to me. But that's what I've tried to do through the years.
Back. Oh, Rich?
Congratulations to all so deserving. Al, I want to ask you a question about what Gary alluded to, that 5-day period at the end of the 99 season where you guys got to sweep the Pirates and then you are in a one-game playoff, really not knowing until the night before who you're even pitching against, and then the Arizona game on. What was that 5-day period like, and was that like unlike any 5 days you ever experienced?
I think the excitement of it all, you get consumed by what's transpiring, right? So we knew we were good, and we were on the verge of something special. Obviously, the next year we go to the World Series. But that particular game, because when we completed our 162nd game, because of the central time zone, we had to wait for Cincinnati and Milwaukee. And you're right, I'm pitching game one against Randy Johnson in Arizona, or we're going to make this detour into Cincinnati. And I think for all players, and maybe just where I was mentally when I got to the Mets, if you're locked in, and you feel good about what you're doing and what you're accomplishing and the execution and the plan, the process roll and all that, it's exciting. So we were up in the Diamond Club. We had to wait. I remember our game was quick. I think their game might have been extra inning.
They had a rain delay.
They had rain delay. So, but I felt good. I felt good either way. I was I was prepared for it. I think my experience previously of being in World Series helped because it's a compelling game. You fly into Cincinnati, pitch poorly, a good chance you're flying back to LaGuardia. But I was at a place where I was excited about it. And I was excited about our team because we were starting to feel the mojo. And it was building. So it was all positive.
The back.
Question for you. When obviously your son is a big-time prospect now in baseball, but he was born when you were playing for the Mets, if I'm not mistaken, early in the 2000 season.
2000, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, anything you remember about that day, if he was born on a game, an off day, anything about him running around the clubhouse?
Yeah.
We've seen, famous Patrick Mahomes Mets pictures of him running around. I'm wondering, now that your son's on the verge of the major leagues, what do you remember about him when you were with the Mets?
Well, I wish he could be here. He's in Double-A with Texas, and he's doing his thing in Frisco. I think I have 3 girls, love them all, but having my son who took to baseball early, 2000 he was too young. He's a baby, but I know for my last 4 years, he was 4 years old when I was my last year at the Mets. So anytime I had an opportunity to bring him out, and you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, but I know when Tommy Glavine was here, Peyton and all of them, J.J. Franco and all of them, we'd get the chance to get out either early or after the game and, play wiffle ball or, something out on the field. So it started early for seeing my son love the game. And it being the year we go to the World Series was even more special.
Clap.
Congratulations to all of you. This question is for Al and Hojo. Just hearing you talk about your memories of playing with the Mets, I wonder if you miss that, if you miss being 25 years old and being an active player, or is it all in the rearview mirror for you? And in Al's case, are you living the game now through Jack, your son? And the second part of the question is, what do you think about the way the game is played today compared to when you guys were Mets?
Oh, you clap.
You know the answer.
As Mr. Wilpon sits behind you. By the way, this moment is about thanking a lot of people. And as a player, I don't know what Hojo's going to say, but, there are so many people that make this possible, right? So you have to get traded. Then you have to have an owner in Mr. Wilpon to give the resource to say, okay, we'll give him a multi-year deal to keep you in a place long enough. You have to have a manager who trusts you to create those moments. So the layers of other people to eventually get, for us to be here is a lot to mention and be thankful for. What did you ask again? I'm going to eliminate the game part.
You miss playing?
Miss playing. No, clap. Are you still playing in the Met League? Yeah. So I had my second hip done in February. I officially blew out my arm 3 years ago playing long toss in Nashville, playing catch with my son, and I threw it, and I felt it official. I take a video of this, and I send it to my girls, Lori and my girls, saying, and the reason, the coincidence of it was 32 years that day that I made my Major League debut. And I knew I popped. I knew it was, yeah. That's why they didn't sign me that last year in 05. They knew something was going on in there. No, no, clap. I was maybe the first year out, because I could still, my last pitch was 92 miles an hour, and I was done. But no, it's long gone. 5 knee surgeries, 2 hips. You're a better pitcher than me now.
Yeah, I think there's probably not a day goes by that we don't think about that, like being able to play the game that we did when we were 25 play at that level. Every time you get out of bed, there's a reminder that was a long time ago. It's almost like 2 different people. Yeah. And the older we get, that person goes further and further away. And I don't like that. I want to know that person that still played. I want to know who that person was. And, the things that you learn from that time, what you can pass on to other players, your own family, my son, my grandkids, whatever. That's what really gets me going. I love doing that. And, the game today is just different. It's just a different game. We were talking to Buck earlier in the office, and he was talking about the different stats. Remember that all the and what they mean, but he converted it to our language, so the language that we know. The cavemen know, right? That's all we know. It's like we just point, yeah, that. So it's just a matter of having an open mind and just trying to grasp it.
I think Clap's trying to recruit us for his Met League team.
He might be. He might. I don't feel that good, Clap. So don't.
A couple more, Greg.
Hi, congratulations again, everybody. Whether it was as a player growing up in the backyard trying to pitch, trying to hit, or as a broadcaster talking into a tape recorder, once you made it into the big leagues, what surprised you about life in the big leagues? And for you guys who announced the games, what surprises you still?
Well, I'll tell you what didn't really surprise me, but I wasn't ready to accept it. Way back in 1980, I remember Lee Mazzilli telling me the thing that's going to eventually take him out of the game is the travel. Now, he was, like 25 in 1980, and I'm about the same age. And so I could not envision how at that age life on the road could be anything but a lot of fun. But as the days and years wear on and the baseball schedule becomes as unforgiving as it is, I always remember that Maz told me that, and that certainly has come home to roost the last few years, because I think most of us who do radio which is, the majority of the game, the overwhelming majority of the games, need to manage our schedule a little bit as we get older. I mean, if we're going to continue, and I've got no plans to hang this up, but you really need to be able to take a week here and a week there to decompress, or else the schedule is going to get you, and the travel is going to get you. The food on the road stinks. Hotels, we stay in the best hotels you can imagine, but it's not home. It's still a hotel. And so I would say, having been somewhat prepared for that, was eye-opening because it, as I say, proved to be quite true. That was the biggest surprise to me, that Maz was right.
Well, going from being a fan to being a broadcaster at the highest level in Major League Baseball, I think the thing that you learn very quickly is what extraordinary athletes these guys are. It's very easy for people to sit in the stands and watch Major League Baseball players fail, and it's a game of failure. But even the last guy on a Major League roster is an extraordinarily talented athlete, and just standing behind a batting cage and watching the hand-eye coordination involved, again, with the lowliest of major leaguers, is something so far beyond the ken of those of us who can't do those things. I think it makes you appreciate just what this game is and how difficult it is to play and how monumentally talented all of these players are. To me, that was the most eye-opening piece.
Tyler, the last one.
Just two quick questions for Howard. You've probably been asked this a million times, but 84 Mets or 84 Tigers or 86 Mets, two of the best teams in recent memory. Who would win in a short series? And second of all, your 30-30 seasons. Your 30-30 seasons are some of the best, maybe the best, one of them, in Mets history. Have you ever taken time to look at the individual seasons in Mets history and seen just how well yours stack up?
Well, it's hard to look back at all the seasons and see how they stack. The only thing I can go off of is how many times has it happened since, right? So there hasn't happened a lot, and 30-30. It's more of a marathon than a sprint, and I think we remember the sprint and we don't remember the marathon as much. And so when I look back on that, I just think, man, when I look back, when I talk about two different people, I think sometimes I actually did that. And when I look at myself in the mirror now, I'm like, you actually did that. And I have to remind myself sometimes. But I can still remember it, and there's parts of it that I love to think about all the time. And so now, the 86 Mets, 84 Tigers, I got asked that this morning on the radio. And because of my location, I'm going to say the Mets. But the Tigers would give them a fight, I'll tell you that right now. I think the Mets starting pitching was deeper than Detroit's. The back-end bullpen, I think, was deeper, like our middle guys to get us to the last guys, right? Those guys were better. But from a player position player standpoint, you really can't distinguish either one. I think both teams were very equal and very similar in the way they won. Score early, pitching does their job, you score late, it's over, and that's how you win.
Thank you very much, everyone. At this time, we're going to get everyone together for a photo op. We're going to move the tables and